Chapter 11, Standards, Assessments, and Accountability. And in this chapter, we're going to run over a lot of stuff pretty fast, so don't get too long. But the first part is just educational standards. And what I need you to do is at least be familiar with these things like Common Core standards, some of this stuff. We get down here in student learning that you have an understanding that you can explain diagnostic, norm referenced, criterion referenced, capstone, because the next level of this will be for you. And so you'll need this performance, and this one gets a little bit long. And then down here, a basis for accountability. And again, some of these terms you need to be able to pronounce and know. There's some stuff here on high stakes testing, pressure to cheat. I ask you to investigate some of that yourself. But a whole thing on standards, not always the sexiest and the most fun to talk about, but certainly a trendy thing that you're going to have to be familiar with. Unlike some of the other things, that you'll revisit some of these things now in your courses, in your methods courses, but you need to be prepared and be able to speak intelligently as if you've heard some of this before. So let's start with this. Let's start with the textbook. And here is the outcomes. Analyze the importance of stating learning outcomes and standards and different types of standards. And 2, understand and apply formal and informal assessments to determine the students know. And then this current things in this. And of course this pretty interesting read. Again, these authors show their bias with a shot here on this about Common Core. And then down here, again, it comes back, attention to standards related to issues. Even more alarming are the reports of teachers systematically changing student responses on the test. So it was a big shock. In fact, a bunch of them in Atlanta here, it says, were arrested and lost their teaching license. A lot of pressure. And so that's what happened there, but not a bad read. Very biased, but still kind of let you know what's going on. Okay, so let's move on here to education in the news like this. Let me give you a quick up on it. Right here, teachers are being held accountable. As never before, teachers are being held accountable for making the difference in student learning. Okay, did you know that? So for a long time in this business of preparing you to be a teacher, we measured your inputs. We measured how well you taught. But the industry has changed with these high-stakes tests now. What it's became is a focus on the outputs. So is this right? Do you agree with this? So you're going to take your first stab at this, and that is on responding to this, learning accountability. And what I'm going to do is give you this. Here, I'm going to link this in Flipgrid. And what happens is when you click on this, you should get this. And then you simply hit the green button and your video and your voice should come up here. All right. And it says right here, it's sensing my voice, that my voice is awesome. And then you'll respond to me. So first, this is my thing. Who should be accountable for learning? So you'll do this and hear what I have to say, and then you'll respond by hitting this button. And I'm a little afraid to do it for fear that it will make kind of a mess here. So if this doesn't work, do a little investigating and Google why not. But my understanding, this is set up now that you should be able to hit this button and respond to my question here about learning accountability. So I'm going to show you where I'm going to put it. I'm going to take this right here, and I'm going to put it right here in the lecture thing here. And I expect to see you all respond. And I think I'm going to come right down here and say, okay, And then I'm going to, of course, change this back. And I'm going to link it. I'll open in a new window. And so this will be right below here, and you should be able to make that work, and it should have your stuff together. So when I click on that, there. First you play what I have to say, and then you record camera and audio. So now we're back, and let's go on after we decide whether we should be accountable or not. So first of all, what are education standards? Standards are a description of the expected output from some sort of endeavor, some sort of learning that you created. That is a standard, what they know. Okay. Popular both in business and education worlds. Are a description of what is expected to be known. Standards have different meaning in different users. Some people view them as synonymous with rigor in the setting with high expectations. And so what is a high-stake test? Tests that have a major consequence or implication. And a standard-based education, the use of explicit outcomes. What students should know and be able to do. So not only that they know, but able to do something with that knowledge, which are outlined in standard to develop instruction. And this is what Common Core was about, is the feds telling us we will decide what those standards should be. Okay, and then this was interesting where this came from. Many states are requiring students to pass a test before they receive a diploma. And so are you for that level of accountability? So the concepts of standards for student learning looks like this. Diverse concepts of conceptions of standards stem from differing expectations and the business leaders, policymakers, and parents. And let me just give you a little bit what that's like. And this will bring it home a little bit to you why this has gotten to be such a big deal. Because this was originally intended to be run by the states, and the states give it to local people. But here is why we're headed towards federalism. Is this diverse concepts? Business leaders tend to want high school graduates who are ready to work. They should be able to read, write, and compute. Right? Can you argue with that? Okay, here the next one. Policymakers think about the larger long-term needs. They are concerned about graduates having knowledge and skills that will help the United States maintain a competitive edge in a global economy. Can you see how that contrasts a lot with what the business leaders want? Now here's the third group. Parents choose standards based on their own personal goals and family histories. Hence, the local involvement. Some parents want their children to go to prestigious colleges. Others want their children to obtain a job immediately after high school. Still others want their children to prepare for a professional career such as doctor, lawyer, engineer. And this influences their thinking. So that's how it got kind of haywire and how we got to this, the Common Core standards. Controversial, and I'm glad they put that in there because it's very controversial. Some states have dropped it after adopting it. Initiative to develop one set of standards that are learning-centered and not teaching-centered, which should be widespread, which there would be widespread consensus, and there's not. And so it was a federalist move towards federalism. A federal government decides the standard. And you go back here, you know what a standard is? Outcomes of what students should know and be able to do. So the feds would describe that. It started in an educational summit here. So let's get started with that. And this will be your first. This will all be number one. But please, again, as usual, don't do this to have a chance to point out some stuff here. So, first of all, here's this educational summit. and it talks about this board of governors and who was there, and it drops a bunch of big names, all who were for Federalist thing. And then our learning centered, that comes right here, like learning centered and teaching centered. It gives you those to do here. And then these other standards here, and I'm going to give you, this will be our first clip. It'd be grade specific, grade levels, focus, integrated, blended. And it's really interesting grade specific because we have so much talk now about not having grades anymore. The trendy thing is non-graded schools where it's based on what you can do and what you're interested in, and there wouldn't be grades yet. Our standards will be grade based, so very interesting concept. There's 11.1, okay. And focus on results, and that's the, so that'll be your first one to bring in. Standards for math practice, and again, this one's a little big, I'm not going to give you this one, but it gives you an idea of what they are. Okay. Okay, and anytime you see this, it means Common Core standards have not been without debate. Okay, and so you look at this, best intentions or conspiracy, Congress increased the state authority, so you get all those here. Let me just read this quickly to you. This intentions of the debate unfolded over much of the 15 years of the 20th century. One example of the intensity of the issue was the politicians on both sides chimed in with what they saw as a solution. For example, Governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, pressed lawmakers to abandon the state's commitment to the Common Core. Many states fully accepted and adopted this. However, meanwhile, academics argued that there was not enough research base to it. And some other states dropped it also, so they don't mention that. These authors obviously are very much in favor of Common Core. Okay, Congress in this, so you put this in here. Okay. And let's move on here. Conceptions of standards in learning and teaching. Students are asked to ask questions. Again, I'm going to give you this. These will be number 2, and this down here will be number 3. Okay, again, let me look at those with you. Here's ask questions like argumentation, and it's just a thing on assessments here. Closed questions, open questions. Teaching begins with understanding expectations of students learning, like to deconstruct standards here. And then what are these other standards? World class, real world, opportunity to learn, content standards. Okay. And this 21st century thing, you can, I see it down here, comes from here, framework. Let's say not this one. Don't worry about this 21st century down here at the bottom. Okay. Then what is the federal role in standards, this historical review? So it says this meeting of the governors, which is so interesting, in 89. And then Goals 2094 was the next step. Okay. And this was President Clinton here. I'm not quite sure what to do with this. There's a question on the test about Goals 2000, and so you better bring these in here, these 4 here of Goals 2000. because they thought that was all. When they passed that, this will be number 4. That was going to take care of everything. We wouldn't have to come back to this again because we had these goals here. You all know how that went. And then No Child Left Behind. That was President Bush. You better write something about that. So I'm going to say this will be number 5. And well, let's make these all number 5. Waiver, number 4, and these all are number 5. And again, when I say these all, a sentence or two that you understand these and you have these to look at to study. Okay, so that's what No Child Left Behind. You were expected to make adequate yearly progress, and that's where the component that district to document gains, test scores, and all categories of students. And what were those categories? Here's what those categories were. Let me see, and please put this in there. As shown by all students achieving the state's proficiency level at grade level or above the state's test. Their federal expectations. I'm going to highlight this for you because you want this to be part of that. Stated that low-income students, students with disabilities, English language learners, and students from different racial and ethnic backgrounds are also to meet state proficiencies in their grade. So at the time, what this was called are the groups that generally did not meet standards. So when this was not achieved by one or more of these subgroups for more than 2 years, if you didn't meet it, if any one of these subgroups, then the school is identified as needing improving. It also required all students would be at the proficient level for their grade level. That's what was hoped. And if you weren't, you were considered to be in need of improvement. 11 was clear all children would not be proficient. And what a shock. This is what people went crazy over, saying, hey, there's no way that we can get these groups. And who would not? Which groups would not? These right here. Low income, disabilities, English language learners, and other racial groups. So in addition to becoming clear that the majority of schools in each state were not meeting AYP targets, which should likely lead to the majority of schools in each state. There are also pressures on schools to have test scores continually rise. And so what came of it is a waiver. It took place, however, an ongoing gridlock in Congress meant that no action was taken. So inspections. So consequently, President Obama began allowing states to apply for waivers, meaning you didn't have to comply. And as part of that waiver application, states had to adopt college or career ready standards, meaning their own, still Common Core, but their own, to growth scores interpreting results. Then this Education Secondary Act returns to more local control. Okay, and you got the waiver, and then this here. The future of standard-based. So standards, whether you know it or not, are now what are driving what teachers teach. So did I say what students learn? No, it's what they teach. What we're holding you accountable for is what students learn. Okay. Many question influence in the future of standards. How will schools, organizations change due to standards? Will graduation requirements change? Will the power relationships change? One important outcome of standards-based is the heavy interest in data. Following the development of standards, teachers need to pay attention to the ways of assessing student learning and using the information to design and adjust curriculum. What's interesting about data, and it's all about data now, but we just had a little discussion about, we want our data to be reliable, but what about this? Okay, What about cheating? So what the point is here, that we're going to rely very heavily on the data, but we're also admitting that the data may be flawed because of cheating. So very interesting about this use of data. Keep that in mind, will you? Long after I'm gone and we want to go to data, just remember some of the data is flawed. But I don't think the standards part's going away, and I really expect federalism to be the norm of the land in a couple years, where you'll have federal curriculum for all subjects, just not math and English language. Okay. So what about student learning? Okay. Assessment is gathering of information, interpreting information, and providing feedback. So that's on the test. And this is what you want to be able to verbalize when asked, what is an assessment? You gather information, you interpret it, what it means, and you do something with it. And ultimately, here's another question on the test. What is the purpose of assessment? To help students learn. Okay. So they are, and now there's two types, two purposes: the formative and the summative. And the formative determine what students learn and plan the next steps, and summative makes a final judgment about the standard. So I need you to say these out loud: formative and summative. And they're pretty self-explanatory, but in the future, when you hear these terms, I don't want any confusion of what they are. Formative is what they're learning right now, and you're using formative assessments to make additional plans. Do you need to teach this subject more, or this particular standard, or in a different way? And summative is when you're done teaching it, make final judgments about what they know about a particular standard. And then this is going to be you. What are we on? About number 6 here. And what is the difference between assessment of learning and for learning? And that comes right here. Of learning is it's like a gatekeeper, like a major use of a summative assessment is a gatekeeper. And please include this in your definition. And what is the gatekeeper? It's the things who is admitted to the profession. For example, college admission offices have a long history of using students' performance on standardized tests as the ACT and ACT about who is admitted. So these types of tests, ACT, SAT, are gatekeepers. You haven't heard that term before, but it determines who gets in and who doesn't. Oh, we sum to the praxis is a gatekeeper assessment. Get it? Okay. And then all kinds of professions have gatekeeper things, have these summative assessments. That's the assessment of learning, a summative one. Assessment for learning is these types of things. Let students know how learning targeted for instructions, these types of things, that you do it on the fly. Okay? So that is what you have there. This will be number 6, and you're going to get a bunch of these. All right, we just had 6. This is number 7. And it's this and this. This is just a heading here. So let's look at what these are. And these are easily, you'll remember these easily. Diagnostic. Testing to determine the student is functioning. What level the student is functioning. So this is where you're diagnosing where to start teaching. It's called a diagnostic measure. Say it. Say it out loud. Diagnostic measure. What student is the level? So this is what we expect you to do. You're going to do your level 3s or start student teaching. You need some kind of a diagnostic measure to know where to start on a particular standard. So where are they at compared to where they should be? Should help teachers design new or different instructional strategies. Assessments provide an array of questions and ask this. That's what diagnostic. The next is norm referenced are used to demonstrate the best in some area. With norm reference assessment, the individual performance is compared with the norm group, meaning everybody else. That's what a norm group is, or similar individuals. Often these are referred to as standardized tests. Have you heard that term before? These tests is rigorous and expensive. They are developed and are carefully revised on a regular basis. And again, an ACT is a standardized test that based your score against the norm group, meaning everybody else that's taken the test. Do not reveal at all what the individual child knows or able to do, only what they are compared to others. They're not appropriate to use to determine whether students meet proficiency outline standards. Are misused more often than any other assessments. Okay. Sometimes state authorities penalize a school district or schools whose students as a group perform below a norm reference test. Flawed, because norm reference is just that particular one. Then a criterion reference is certainly a criteria is set that you have to achieve in order to be successful. So I'll give you, it doesn't mention this here, but here's the most common one that you and I can relate to. The driver's test is a criterion reference test. If you don't score whatever that minimum score is on it, you don't pass, and you have to take it again. That's a criterion reference test. Say it out loud. Okay. Criterion reference manner. The test should be drawn directly from a subject or grade level. So you bring that up. And then capstone can be a summative assessment, and the information may also be used formatively. Typically are developed to assess a milestone accomplishment. These types of assessment are used near the end of a major accomplishment, such as a completion of a course, recital, or graduation. For instance, completing a work sample or portfolio at the completion of student teaching could be capstone. We often think of student teaching as a capstone experience. And many majors have a capstone experience at the end. Okay. So how do we increase the credibility of measures? Well, we need to how about authentic or performance? Here, assessments that are grounded in real-world settings are authentic. Performance demonstrate the learning. Instead of taking a test, you demonstrate that you can do something. One of the easy ways I had for an authentic performance-based is when I was the welding teacher, at the end of the welding unit, they had to make a weld and make it hold, select the right rod, heat, that based on what their metal was. They had to perform an authentic skill. So performance assessments comes from right here, and these are all number 8 down, or no, these are still number 7. I got you. Okay. All right. So here's what performance assessments comes right here, and then common assessments here, measured developed by a group of teachers and applied to all. Okay. So here's some examples of these authentic assessments. Instead of clipping this, I'm just going to ask you to list these under authentic assessments on the next one here. Learning logs and journals, folios and portfolios. Folio is a storage bin, box, or file. Portfolio is an organization of them. Interviews can be authentic. Observation with anecdotal records. And student products and projects all can be authentic assessments. And here are the 3 characteristics of authentic assessments, and you'll list those here. Now we're on number 8. And again, this is just a heading, but you get to tell me about these. What is a benchmark and a context? Those are right there. And then this teacher questioning for assessments. I'm going to see if I can give you this one. And this will be your second clip. Okay, and so what are they? Like analysis questions, comparison questions, classification questions. Okay, so here is, and this is, you hang on to this, this will make you a smart person when you get ready to get in the classroom, these different types of questioning. How is the conclusion misleading? What does it not match? This is a cheat sheet. You're going to put it in your notes, but don't, it'd be a great thing to hang on to. Okay, so that's going to go right here on questioning, right in here. This will be your number 9, 11, 4, table level 4. Okay, so here's your balanced assessment here, and rubrics, and these developing rubrics comes right here. And very interesting, we had a whole workshop on, a couple-day workshop on this one time about 20 years ago, and I find it very complicated, but I know some teachers that are very good with developing rubrics for projects. And if you're going to be effective with project or capstone type things, this is how you would do it. But somebody smarter than me would have to teach you how to do that. But here it gives you some examples of what it would look like. Here's a oral presentation rubric, 5th grade science experiments, one of those. So it's pretty cool. They gave you some examples here. Okay. Basing assessments in a work of a discipline here. Now you get that one right there. Here's professional aspects of good assessments right here, and they list them for you. Base assessments on learning standards, performance, embed assessments in curriculum and instruction. So there, you don't have to do those. There they are. Highly qualified assessments. There's one question on the test about this, by high quality assessments. Okay. And then what about accommodations? And this is interesting too. They gave you a nice piece here on different accommodations for assessments. For example, an English language learner, here's a set of accommodations for those. And if you've had the SPED 100, you understand this term, accommodations. Specify here. So I'm going to clip this also just because we don't get enough of this. And this will be 11.7. Okay. Kids with disabilities and kids that are English language learners. And we're going to put that right here. We're on number 10 here. Bring 11.7 in here. Okay. So allow access to test content without changing the accuracy of the test is those things. I used to make it like this. Accommodations allow you to change it without changing the rigor. You can change their access, but not the rigor, not how hard it is, just the way they access it. And you determine those based on these things, obviously. Student's disability, their age, nature of the assessment, skill or subject, like that. Okay. This goes back here to, oh yeah, fairness. Standardized tests ignore lived experiences, often biased to low-income kids. And why? Because it's here. It doesn't. They don't have the experiences kids from middle level income families have. They don't travel. They're not as aware of the world. Their experiences are much more local. That's a whole nother lesson. And reliability and validity are these two things here. And so we have those. Whether item measure can be teaches what is intended to measure. And it's consisting of information about student learning. So, and that's a whole nother thing. Lots of people make a living assessing validity and reliability of assessments. That's the constant worry with ACTs and SAT tests. As a professor, you worry about that. Is your instrument testing what you intended to test? Is it measuring what you intended to measure? Is it measuring your objectives that you put in? Okay, so now you know. And again, when this term comes up in your methods classes, please pretend or act like you've heard these terms before. Validity and reliability. And it probably better say those words too. That'll help you remember. Validity and reliability. Say them out loud now. Okay, let's move on. And then this is interesting about assessing performance of teachers. California has their own thing here. The PAC and the teacher work sample. We do a teacher work sample here at DSU, and it's where you do a combination of you do a measure of where the students are. You do the diagnostic, you teach, you assess, and at the end of the time you measure what they've learned because of you. I'm not going to make you do that one. Teacher use assessment evidence. I'm going to see where we're at. We are on number 12 here. And you talk about these things right here. They're a little complicated. Let me show you these professional learning communities here, and you'll have some stuff with that. So let's move on assessments for accountability. Okay, so sources and use of data accountability. There are a number of related aspects of accountability. For example, there are new models of measuring performance outcomes. These are important and new approaches to analyzing data. So first of all, there's a growth model, a value-added model, multiple measures like cut scores and multiple assessments. And you are going to pick these out of here. And this will be number 13. And a line about each of those. What is a growth model? Statistical model that measures students' academic achievement over time at the school level. And a value added is really the most trendy thing, a statistical model that measures student growth over a period of time by comparing student performance on the previous exam, not to anything else, just what they got last time on their assessments. Okay. And now we're starting to see some thought of paying teachers based on this value added, how far they've moved the students to encourage them to working with kids with low income lives. Okay, and then multiple measures like a cut score and a multiple assessments, that is there. And what do you think cut score is? What you pass or fail. Here's 2 multi-state testing consortiums. I'm not going to make you do that at all. Okay. Are we moving towards a national curriculum? I'm telling you we are. All right, technology to track student learning. A part on this. Technology allows track students making decisions on future, and again I say just so they're not tainted by cheating. Assessment and data management companies organize including these things, and they are companies that want to help you keep track of things. So the value added compares growth account for characteristics such as poverty, and that's what the idea of that is. Relies on multiple measures of performance. Okay, and here are those companies that want to do that. And again, I'm not sure that's appropriate. So here, let's get into what this is. Here, and these are so testing challenges like high stakes testing. Again, this will be our, what number are we on? 14. You get these. And they're all right here. High stakes testing, we talked about that. Severe consequences. This is our question for discussion. Is this does prepping for high stakes tests interfere with teaching? Again, please don't respond until you've read both points of view. So we're going to put this right down here, and you get to respond to that with your classmates. Okay. Let me go back here to the book. Here's this pressure to cheat, teaching to the test. One size fits all, the criticism of that. Increased teacher burden, equity with accountability, and then opting out of this. So let me just look at the pressure to cheat with you. Principals invest concerted effort into their students, and nearly every school classroom teacher stopped their regular instruction for weeks or more to help students prepare for tests. And one of the things that we used to do, and I'm sure they still do, is just practice test-taking skills, because they are high-pressure tests, and that was teaching to the test. And there used to be a big taboo if you were teaching to the test, but I just thought it was somewhat moronic not to teach what was going to be on the test. And that was when I was in teacher ed. You better not be teaching to the test. Well, how do you expect students to do well on a test that you haven't taught them what's on it? Other data refute the claim that teachers spend less time teaching content in the past, the elementary level. So you do this, all these here, and we'll call it a day. Assessments.